Well, it is great to be with you all again. I always enjoy doing these. I love talking about Metabase. Been with the company for a long time, since 2015, and just really enjoy using Metabase myself too. So it's always a pleasure to just kind of give you a tour. I'm going to try to stick to the agenda that I gave you, Margaret. I might here and there kind of, just remember something I want to tell people. So, give me your grace there. But let's kind of jump into it. The, prompt for this webinar was building better visualizations. And of course, that could be taken in a number of different ways. I know that some of you have probably very specific kinds of analysis or specific sorts of metrics that you're trying to visualize the best way. And it would be very hard for me, of course, to get into every single person's very specific situation. So, what I'm going to try to do is rather than give you like sort of a broad, tour of every single visualization, which I think is going to be too basic, what I've elected to do is kind of focus on some of the primary visualizations that I know people, use day in, day out. Talk about some of the more advanced or esoteric options that are present in those that you might not be aware of, and also at some points try to give you my thoughts on um, how best to use these visualizations, as well as some ways to accomplish some common types of things that are maybe a little bit outside of like the most obvious pathways. Hope that sounds good. Let's get into it. I want to start with the humble old table visualization. So much of our, data ends up being tabular. I mean, anything that you want to visualize, of course, has to be tabular in nature. Any query result is tabular in nature. And so, this kind of basic table visualization, of course, is great for cases where you've got a list of records often, and you just want to provide people a means to scroll through them, look at individual records, maybe look up a particular one. Something really common when you're trying to massage this kind of data, especially if you don't have like a really mature, polished, data warehouse with all of your joins and everything like that already done, is you're going to want to probably pull in columns, hide columns, move them around. That's made even easier with some recent updates to Metabase. One or two things that I'm going to be showing you today are yet to come in, our next major release, which shouldn't be too far away. I think that this particular feature, for example, is not yet released, but we've made some improvements here to the adding or removing of columns from this mode of Metabase rather than from the notebook editor. So from now, it's much easier to go in here and see any of the tables or models that are linked to the one that you're looking at via foreign key. And you can just simply do a quick add all to join in. This is really a join happening behind the scenes. And pull in all the columns that are linked via foreign key like that. It's then also very easy to remove them all if I wanted to. And then I can go back here. And now we've also made some performance tweaks. So if you're just trying to like temporarily or quickly hide a given column, like I don't need this ID column twice, I can just do that from here and just make it disappear. These are all example fake emails. So that's a really quick way to pull in columns. And of course, it's trivially easy to rearrange them. I won't dwell on that. So I also wanted to talk about the idea of providing some context for people when they're looking at these kinds of lists of records, particularly in the case where you might have a list that includes some sort of metric or some sort of numeric values. Like in this case, we're looking at some imaginary pretend invoices along with the accounts that are associated with those invoices. And what we might want to do is give people some context for a given record, where this particular payment value sits in the overall distribution of values here. Like, is this high or is this low? And there's a couple ways that I can do that as, the creator of a record or a view like this. I mean, one of them is this little feature called mini bar charts. So I can just toggle this on right here through the column options. It's also accessible through the visualization options here. If I were to go into the side panel and click on this overflow menu here, I get the same menu. But I find this just to be faster often. So it's a little tricky to see here. I can sort descending so you can see what I'm doing, but it's just as you would imagine. I kind of get this little histogram vertically that shows me the position of a given value in the overall distribution of values that are present in this result. So that's a nice way to just immediately have some context. Let's turn this off and we'll do something kind of similar using conditional formatting. So conditional formatting, of course, lives over here. And you can do a couple of things with this, one of which is the same kind of thing, giving like people a sense of, let's do this actually on payment. of the range of values. So I'm going to use a color range for this. And, there's a number of different ways to, utilize color semantically. So in cases where there is some semantic meaning to like a low number being truly something that is problematic, like, I don't know what it might be. Actually, the example I'm thinking of is the reverse, where like, number of days that it took for like a package to like arrive at somebody's house or something. You might want to have it so, of course, like the higher numbers are red and those are bad. In this case, we're just really trying to give people a sense of like the range for the payment, and so we maybe just want to go from like white to green or white to blue or whatever the case may be. Again, this is very much serving the same exact function or purpose as those mini bar charts. It's more of a stylistic choice here. And really that's up to you. I mean, in some cases, if you've got like a lot of these kinds of columns, it can maybe look harmonious if all of them are conditionally formatted in this same way using these kinds of color ranges, or you might find it a little chaotic if you have lots of different colors going on. So you want to evaluate those sorts of attributes. Another thing that I like to do sometimes with these sort of record views is to call out particular records. So, especially ones that might be less common or outliers in some way. So we can also use conditional formatting for cases like that, where like, let's say I want to highlight any of these accounts where the plan is like our premium one or something like that. So I can do that using a conditional trigger. So I'll look for on the plan column, the value of premium. And then I'll go ahead and highlight the whole row. This will just help it stand out a bit more as I scroll down. So now as I just go through all these records, it's just really easy now to just stop when I find the ones that are the kind of exception to the rule. This is especially the case, this whole highlight the whole row thing, if I've got a really wide table and I'm maybe looking at some other attribute or dimension of these records and don't really have that particular column in view. All right, that's it for the thoughts I wanted to share on the basic table visualization. I saw a lot of you, of course, in the chat talking about really financial tables. And of course, I think that that's code for pivot tables. Let's talk about pivot tables. The table capital T visualization Metabase, the basic table one, actually does have like a basic pivot table look to it. And that only happens though, in cases where we have a single metric broken out by 2 dimensions. So if I break out the count of my invoices by the type of plan, as well as like say the date received by year, it'll default, of course, to a line visualization because I have a time dimension in this case. And Metabase's auto visualization feature like this, unless you've explicitly chosen a visualization, it'll try to choose the best one based on the dimensions that you pick. But if I go over here and force the table visualization like so, you'll notice that it actually has pivoted by one of the 2 dimensions that I broke out by. So this is the very like simple little pivoted table view. It's just controlled by this toggle right here. You can pick which of the 2 columns to pivot. This is way like, again, the simplest version of it, and typically not what you're trying to accomplish if you have, many metrics, many dimensions, and of course a pivot table visualization is where that comes in. So I'm going to give us more of a real world use case where not only do I have like the count of invoices, but I want to know the sum of payments. I'd like to know the average of payments. Maybe that's enough for the metrics. I'll also then break out, what am I breaking out by? Plan, date received, how about the source of where my customers came from, as well as we can bin like the number of seats, that each of these accounts has, and break out that by that as well. So now we have like a good number of dimensions and metrics here, a total, of 7 fields in our result. And our pivot table visualization is very much what you probably have come to expect from something like Excel, Google Sheets. We're following that same kind of pattern where each of the fields in your query result are then assigned per your choice to each of these different sort of bucket areas where you can determine which ones generate the rows in the pivot table, which ones generate the columns, and which ones are the metrics or the measures. And a couple other things are going on here automatically. So you're going to have subtotals for each of your every grouping dimension except for the innermost one. So you can see here, like, for example, we've got all the totals for the year. and so forth. And then across the way, we've got the row totals. And of course, it's smart enough to know that like we shouldn't be summing the averages, but rather taking the aggregate average across that row, or vertically down, for each of the groupings. Just a couple of little things that you probably know, but just in case you don't, I mean, we have things like the bulk ability to close or expand different groupings that you've broken out by, just to show you how also you can rearrange these and choose which of these dimensions are generating columns versus rows, etc. Maybe it's also self-evident, but this is how, of course, you would change which of the fields are the innermost or outermost groupings. And yeah, this is, I think, fairly standard fare for pivot tables. Something that we also have the ability to do here is to toggle on and off row totals and column totals for the entire visualization. But then more recently, we've added the ability for you to do that at a more fine-grained level and turn the totals on or off for a specific grouping that you may not want to show the totals for. You can also, at that dimension level, define the sort order for just that grouping. So if for some reason I didn't like the way that, say, like my sources were being sorted, I could go ahead and change that from, but it's really basic right now. It's just ascending versus descending, but I can do that there. Margaret, just curious, just because so many people asked in the chat, were there any specific questions I might be able to address about pivot tables here before I move on?
One question we can pick up right now, I think, comes from Roberta. It's about Roberta always gets the message pivot tables can only be used with aggregated queries when he tries to do the pivot table. Maybe you know the answer to that.
Yeah. I'd be curious to understand more what Roberta's trying to do specifically in this case. It might be the case that you have some data that's been pre-aggregated and you're just trying to visualize it that way, where you're just assigning the already calculated values. I don't recall off the top of my head. I know that there are some limitations with this visualization type when it comes to um, I believe it's only possible currently via the graphical editor. And I think part of the reason of that is the way in which we're implementing these auto totals. There's just that limitation presently. So maybe I'll be able to follow up with that question later on.
Okay, and other questions, they are not related specifically to pivot tables, but I think we can pick them up at the end.
Great. I'll keep going then. I'd love to continue on to line charts. We've got a lot to cover, so let's go. So line charts, another workhorse visualization type, obviously, and I think that I wanted to show you some of the cool stuff that can really come in handy when doing comparisons. So often time series are really about obviously seeing trends over time, but comparing one metric over time to another one in some way. And one of the limitations that people often run into, of course, is the reality that Metabase doesn't do cross database querying. And so that can be limiting in some cases, again, especially if you don't yet have like a mature data warehouse where you're pulling in, the data from different like production or, transactional databases into one unified data warehouse. You might have cases where you're trying to compare a metric from like database A to a metric in database B. But I'll show you how you can actually do that in Metabase. So what I'm going to do is actually go ahead and create a new dashboard. And we're going to call this one comparison. And we'll go ahead and create that. And I've already created two different saved questions that I'm going to use for this little demo here. I'm going to add them to this dashboard. And one of them is the number of invoices per week. And that is based off of our sample data set. And then the other question I've created is this one that's called meals per week. It's from a data set that a friend shared with me that just was when they recorded every meal they ate during 2022, which was kind of interesting to see. And it comes from a different database. It's just a local MySQL database that I'm running on my machine here. And so this sample data set is H2. The other one is MySQL. And so this is a case where we've got metrics in different databases that we want to compare to each other. I don't know why I want to be comparing invoices to number of meals, but here we are. So I'm going to go ahead and click this Add Series button up here. And what this is going to do is show me a modal listing out all of the saved questions that I've got that are joinable effectively. So this is under the hood, it's doing a front end join on the dimension. And so it's looking for other, saved questions that have the same kind of structure. And so you can see this meals per week question is being presented to me as an option. It'll also can work with SQL queries, just as an aside. And so you can see here the result of it, where I've got these, 2 line charts now together joined at last. While we're here and while we're talking about this kind of thing, you can actually do this same sort of thing with scalars or just number values. And maybe this is a little bit unexpected, but what I'm going to show you is I've got these 3 different count questions here. They all look like this. I'll actually show them to you separately so you can see them. I don't know. Oh, this is the wrong one. What do we got? People, reviews, and there was one other count question. I got count of orders. There we go. So here's how they look currently. But what I actually want to do is I'm going to do a similar kind of thing as I did with a line chart. I'm going to join these together. And what I can do here is actually, it's like I'm kind of doing a union. And I'm going to be comparing these scalar values to each other side by side in a way that'll then default to visualizing them as a bar chart. And again, this might be unexpected, but it can actually be kind of useful in cases where you're actually maybe trying to do some kind of a funnel visualization, or even just trying to compare a set of scalar values where they don't really need to have any sort of shared dimension because they're just a flat value and there's some purpose to comparing them side by side, and it would be hard to create this question in a single saved question for some reason, or again in cases where you are doing this across metrics from different databases. You also have a couple different options here where if you go in here you can change this from the kind of default bar chart way of visualizing this to like literally forcing it to be a funnel. This is nonsensical, of course. We want the values to be in descending order. But in this situation, I can actually kind of create a funnel visualization. Maybe I have like, sessions or something like that in a couple different places, and I want to have those flat scalar values displayed side by side. So just a neat trick that I don't know if everybody already knew about. One last thing I actually wanted to show you while we're still here on dashboards is just to show you this visualization type that we added a couple of releases ago and is useful in the context of a dashboard, which is this details visualization, where what you can do is display a single record and have it be laid out in this way where it's almost like a little mini bio kind of card. It comes built in with pagination if the query that's powering this has more than one result. And what's neat about this then is if you then parameterize your dashboard with some kind of a filter that's like on, say, ID, then you could end up creating this sort of a dashboard that could be about like one given account or one specific user, right? Where you might have like their lifetime value in dollars or euros or whatever, along with their account details, maybe their like sessions over time or whatever you want to do. It's a neat way to kind of build that sort of like bio or detail page. But we're not here to talk about dashboards. This is technically a visualization. I think it's most, again, useful in the context of a dashboard. It feels a little weird in my mind to do this as a standalone safe question. Just to show you what that would be like, we could go over here and go to the detail view of it. Maybe this is what you want. You want people to kind of paginate record by record in this way. But just so you know, like, actually, that's not where I wanted to go. If we go back to the actual rows themselves, there's always the ability for you to enter into that same kind of detail view using that expand right here. All right, I'm off topic already, but there's just so many neat little things to show you. Let's get back to line charts. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. I'm excited about this. Ratios. I think that something that often comes up is, you want to understand some kind of like segmentation ratio, like of my total number of customers, what quantity of them or what percentage of them rather are premium or something like that, where I want to compare the relative, representation of one particular segment of users or accounts or whatever to the whole. And so the example that I've cooked up for you here, pun absolutely intended, is using that same meals data set that I was showing you before. So I have these two saved questions here. One of them is the total number of meals eaten each week. And then there is this segmented one, which is just filtering out the meals and only counting the ones where this person ate meat. And this friend of mine was trying to, decrease the number of meals that they ate every day that included meat last year. And so just to show you the structure of this question, I mean, this is nothing complicated, right? So just filtering down the date range here, this is just a count over time. And then if we go back to the other one, this is the one with just, has meat is equal to true. So these are actually the meals that do have meat. And what I want to do to calculate this ratio, because these are two separate saved questions, right? And I want you to kind of think of it as one of the saved questions is going to represent the numerator, and the other saved question is going to represent the denominator. So in this case, I'm really using the same metric, this is count of meals, but just dividing the ones with meat by the total. In other cases, you might be doing something else, like dividing one metric by another to get that kind of a ratio. But this is what I'm doing here. And the way I'm going to do it is by doing an explicit join. And what I can do here is actually use another saved question in this join. And I'm going to go grab that one that is the total number of meals per week. And I'm going to join them on week right here, like so. And we can use this preview button here to see our intermediate results. You can see that this count, again, is the numerator. It's the number of meals that do have meat. And these are the total meals eaten. And I can also exclude this superfluous, redundant, additional date column here. I don't need that in my join. And so now these are zippered up on week and have the two numbers I need. And then I'm just simply going to create a custom column here that's going to take the count divided by the other count, the meals per week count, right? So again, these are the ones with meat. These are the ones with all of them in total. And then we'll just call this ratio and we'll call it done. And then I can see now that I've got that ratio right there, right? So 50%. And then when I go to visualize this, now I've got multiple columns from which to choose for my y-axis. So I want to make sure that I'm using the ratio one here. And then I can, use some of the features that you probably already know about, things like showing values on data points. And then I can also go over here to my metric and change the formatting of it to %. And that's looking pretty neat, where I can see the % of meals that had meat. Maybe I have a goal where I really just want to only have, fewer than half of my meals should be ones with meat. And I can see that, week over week, doing pretty good, right? There was only a handful of weeks here where more than half of the meals included meat. So that's just an example of doing a nice little ratio. While we're on this subject, I actually thought it would be cool to show you a little bit about just annotation in general. So we already looked at goal lines, but annotations for time series are a great way to add additional context for your users when they're trying to understand, well, why is there this spike, or what is the goal and why, and can spark those sorts of conversations, and also encode kind of institutional knowledge about something, right? One second. So the three kinds of annotations that I want to show you that are included in Metabase currently are goals, which we've already done, trends, which right now are fairly straightforward. It's just an on-off toggle. It's just showing you. I'm a little out of my depth here. I always get mixed up on the different types of functions that are used here to depict the trend. But here is our basic trend. It's showing you, of course, like the general trend of this line. We have definite plans to expand on this, by the way, to soon include things like the moving average and other kinds of functions that one might want to use to depict the type of trend. So trends, goals, incidentally, similarly, we've got plans to allow you to do things like define a more dynamic goal rather than just currently you can enter in a static value. but using another column from a query result as the goal, or even eventually choosing a column from another query result entirely to define the goal, so that you also don't just need to have a goal that's completely flat, but maybe a goal that changes over time, up or down. But that's in the future. Let's talk about the present. The third thing that I wanted to show you is a feature that I feel like sometimes I don't necessarily hear people being aware of it. So I just always love to call it out when I can. And that is our events feature. So events live over here in the corner of the Save Questions screen. And they're a way of just adding like, typical kind of like timeline annotations. Our mental model in Metabase for how these events work is that rather than being attached to a single visualization, they live inside of a collection. And the thinking there is that allows you then to create a set of events that are associated with a given topic or area or team. So if I'm dealing with my marketing team or something like that, maybe then I've got certain kinds of blog posts or releases or ad campaigns or whatever it might be that could be relevant for me to display on any time series that is present within that same collection, not just a specific one. So it prevents you from having to duplicate work. You can pull in different events for any of your time series in that collection. I'll just also just show you how this works so you can see. You don't have to just listen to me talking. But I don't know. Let's pick one. Like I said, like blog post or something like that. And we'll pick. How about, I don't know, August 24th, 2023. I can use my keyboard. And we'll say this is our first post. And we can choose a little happy icon. The star is fine, actually. I'll be boring. And so now this event is present here. It's only going to show up, I believe, for saved questions. So I can go ahead and save this and call this my ratio of meat meals and save it. We don't want to add it to a dashboard. And now, it's because I put it in a different year. So of course, the way to fix that then would be to go back to here. And I'll show you then where my events live. So they are, like I said, associated with this collection that I've put them in. If I have a lot of events, incidentally, I can group these together into, that's not what I wanted to do, into timelines like this. So maybe I have one that's for blog posts and then individual blog posts within it. I have another one for ad campaigns and so on. You get the idea. So this just gives me more organizational control. And then also I can use this to then pull in one timeline onto my chart versus another and sort of toggle those on or off. What I want to do though is correct this one so that it'll actually show up on our saved question. So let me just change the date here to 22, like so. And now when I go back to that ratio question, then I should see my happy little star with my blog post annotation here, and it's showing up on my time series. When I click on it here, then it'll open up that whole events sidebar, and you can put whatever you want here. I believe it even supports just basic, like you can dump in a link or whatever, right? And therefore point people to further information so that they can understand what exactly happened on that date. Cool. Trends, goals, events. Let's now move on to another visualization type. Let's talk about bar charts. I find bar charts to be, my go-to visualization for many things, not least of which, of course, when I'm trying to visualize data that, is broken out by a categorical dimension, and especially one where there are not too many like distinct values. At some point when you have like a whole ton of distinct values, you're really like better off with a table probably, or maybe a row chart. And I find myself often ending up on bar charts because I love this distribution action that we have. It's like a fast way of summarizing a model or a table that you're just viewing the unaggregated view of. So let's say I wanted to understand what meat, my friend ate the most. I can just click on this and click the distribution to get this kind of histogram view of all of these, different kinds of meat. And it looks like my friend really likes chicken. Also, another kind of quick way to just fine tune a visualization in this kind of iterative way really handy to come over here and say, like, I don't want this bar that has like the, like a white, what do you call white space here? Because this is not really telling me anything other than these are just the meals with no meat. So I'll just exclude that, right? And kind of kick it out of my bar chart. So that's all well and good. But I think that the more interesting kind of bar chart, let's go back over here and come over to our invoices. I think that stacked bars are primarily what I want to talk about. It's often the case where people go to bar charts, right? So if I break out by 2 dimensions here, so plan and let's say source, now I can kind of see a little bit more insight into, of all of my plans, basic, business, premium in this imaginary company, where did those users come from? It's going to default to this side-by-side bar. And you probably know that you can come over here and switch over to stacking. And this is, is a nice way of looking at, a dimension by its sub-attribute, right? In this kind of case too, like stacking to 100% can be an interesting way of looking at something just from a different perspective. So in this case, I can now instantly see that the ratio for the accounts that came in via invitation was way disproportionately larger for the premium accounts than for like the basic account. You can imagine in this hypothetical scenario that makes sense, that premium customers need to be handheld and they want to be, whatever the case is, right? Like we're telling a little bit of a story here, but this is again interesting in cases where there's a vast disparity between like the absolute numbers. There's way more basic plans than premium in this case, and it's obscuring the real story here that I might be wanting to tell, which is more about the channel distribution for a given plan, right? Incidentally, like all of these same kind of stacking abilities are possible now for both row charts as well as for area charts. Again, like this is a little bit up to authorial or editorial choice. I think, again, rows are better in cases where you've got maybe more than a dozen distinct values that you're trying to visualize. A bit easier to read all of the labels for those in this kind of vertical orientation. And then area charts maybe make more sense for cases where one of your primary dimensions is time. And again, you want to kind of see the movement from one period to the next. Also, just in case you didn't know this too, I imagine that you do. Over here, you can, of course, also display the actual absolute values on top of each bar, and we'll be working towards soon including the actual values within each of the sub bars here. And again, maybe you're on an older version of Metabase, but a while back we kind of nicely refreshed these tooltips, so it'll automatically show you the percent breakdown for each of the distinct values within that stack. I feel like there was something else I wanted to say here. Oh yeah, it was about how it might not be self-evident to you that this is the way in which you can determine which of your dimensions is doing the breaking, is the breakout versus the x-axis. There's some improvements in the work here about making this a little bit clearer and more appropriately labeling this as the breakout rather than being kind of like a sub-property of the x-axis, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But just how it works today is if I want to switch this and have the account source be the x-axis and have the breakout be the plan, I just swap these by dragging it like so. And then also, incidentally, you can drag individual objects within the breakout like so if you want to kind of customize both the legend and then just the orientation of which of those blocks comes first. Okay, so that's stacking. We touched on row charts. I wanted to briefly about bar charts. So I have a kind of I was going to say a love-hate relationship with bar charts, but it's probably more of just a hate-hate relationship. So I'm sorry if pie charts are your favorite visualization type. I often joke with people here at Metabase that the best way to fix your pie chart is to just come over here and click the bar button. That'll immediately fix it. But in all seriousness, of course, pie charts have their place. They can be, in some cases more aesthetically appealing to certain people. Cough, cough, executives. But also in cases where you have, a few number of distinct values for your dimension, it can be like a fine and appropriate way of, highlighting the maybe relationship of those values. So in this case, basic, business, premium, it's pretty easy to see here immediately, like how much of the pie is sliced up into basic. Once you exceed like 3 or 4 distinct values, just go to a bar chart. I do want to call out, though, that there's a couple of neat little things you can do here regarding both legends and labels now. So you have the ability to, by default, we're showing you the percentages. You can kick those off if you don't want them, or you can display them now on the chart itself here. Not quite enough room to show it for that slice. But this way, maybe we just want to keep our legend nice and clean with the labels of each of the values, and then just have the percentages be on the chart itself. That's all I have to say about pie charts. I've said enough. So I'm getting close to the end of my time here. So I'm going to kind of skim real quick through numbers because I want to get to maps. So numbers, I'm not really going to dwell on like simple scalar values at all. I think that's just like tremendously too basic. But I do want to say that there are a couple interesting ways to visualize a scalar value beyond the dashboard trick I showed you. We also, of course, have gauge and progress charts. And I think I just wanted to call out real quickly on the gauge chart a couple of little things that may not be obvious about how it works. So you saw by default, it's going to generate these regions for you based on like the current scalar value from your result. It's simply just doubling whatever the value is in order to create like a max of the range, and then placing your value smack dab in the center. All of this, of course, is configurable. And also, just in case you weren't aware, you don't have to stick with these 3, traffic light kind of ranges. You could always add additional ones as you see fit and change the bounds of those. One other thing I like to do is use this labels feature so that I can do things like, say bad, okay, and good for each of the ranges, and give it some, like, again, semantic meaning, so that people understand exactly what we are talking about for each of those ranges. I find that internally we use these for things like bug counts or NPS scores and things like that, where we have these, semantic groupings that might not be obvious to people, like what is a good NPS score versus a great one versus like a world-class one or whatever. So that's gauges. I think I'm going to skip over progress charts. There's not too much to say about those, or just really quickly show you, like, you type in a goal. Again, as we enhance the goal setting feature across all of our visualizations, this one will receive the benefit of that as well. I wanted to talk about maps. So of course, maps are a great way to visualize, data if you've got a lot of geospatial kind of things. I think that, let me see, which table did I want to show you here? I think the accounts one might have lat long data. Yeah, great. So what I was going to say is that there's 3 core ways for you to visualize geographic data in Metabase currently, and that is our pin maps, our grid lat long maps, and then choropleths or region charts. So pin maps, of course, that's a great way to visualize unaggregated data, or cases where like you want to place every single individual record on the map. And so you can see here, I've got the whole world, and I want to see, every single account that I've got. I think that this is probably a poor use of the pin map because I just have too many individual records. It's probably more interesting to use this for cases where I'm looking at more of a narrow range geographically and fewer individual records or items. Maybe these are warehouses or whatever, target areas or whatever. And there's not like, thousands of them like this. It also is going to cap out at, a certain number of rows, just so that the visualization will load. So, it's also not necessarily showing you everything. If you do have a whole lot of records like this that you are trying to show, a better choice may be actually to change this to a heat map. So the way that it's called actually a grid map here in the product. But what I can do is group this visualization by latitude and longitude, and it'll bin it into degrees, right? So I go over here, I summarize by latitude, I add the secondary grouping of longitude. I don't know why it defaults to a bar chart. That's very silly. So apologies there. It might be because I well, whatever the case. But if I go back over here to my map chart, it's going to default to that grid style. And you can see what it's doing here, right? Like it's giving me, these red hot areas for cases where the count of accounts is higher. And I have the ability to control the size of these bins. So this is auto binning, pardon me, on kind of more of an auto algorithm, but I can specify larger or smaller bins over here just by clicking on this. So if I want to get very fine grained and really understand what's going on, this can then help me to zero in with a greater degree of precision. The last thing I wanted to show you is choropleth region maps, right? So this is great in cases where I've got more discrete values of things like states, provinces, countries. By default, Metabase comes with a United States state map as well as a world countries map. So in this sample accounts table, I can actually just click on distribution here and it'll go and show me the world choropleth here. Something you can do though that you may not know about is if you go over to excuse me, where's the map? There's a link here that you can click on and it'll take you over here to where you can both change the map tile server where we're using OpenStreetMaps, but also this where you can define a link to a specific GeoJSON file that can be used to define the region that you want to visualize. So I've gone ahead and done that for us here. I'm a little bit of a Legend of Zelda nerd, and so this GitHub user, I'm going to butcher this name here, but you can see here, just want to give some credit. They created this GeoJSON file to create this interactive map for Breath of the Wild. And I took that and created a custom CSV that then created a list of the number of like shrines or these like, puzzle locations within that game using that region map here. So you can see now for each of the different places across the land of Hyrule, the count of the number of shrines that there are in each of those areas. So that's just a quick example of how you can create your own custom region map with your own data. And in this case, I'm actually not using aggregated data, it's pre-aggregated. So this was just, again, a simple CSV where I just manually entered in the counts. I'm not doing any summarization at all. And I'm just instead mapping, which field has the metric in here, which of these is defining the region. Incidentally, this was in French, so I had to kind of, do my best to guess at that where Google Translate failed me. So if any of you are native French speakers and want to give me a hand there, that'd be great. That's what I had for you. I wanted to kind of make sure I wrapped in time to take questions. So thanks for listening, for watching. I hope that wasn't too much of a whirlwind tour, and I'd love to field your questions now.